Jim, let's get a few more questions before we get out of here. This next one, sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Julian in London. We've all heard about Vince McMahon's crazy work schedule. I have a simple question. Was it necessary? Was this the only way to run such a huge company? Or just someone who refused to delegate, micromanaged everything, and kept changing his mind constantly? Can the WWE thrive under more normal working conditions? Or will we see things start to slip if Triple H is unwilling to adopt the same brutal schedule? What are your thoughts?
Well, part of column A and part of column B, nobody needed to work as hard or as long or as much or as minutely as Vince McMahon did, but the end result of that was he's been the most successful guy in the business that he's in for the past 40 fucking years. And the thing is, he didn't micromanaging is him. If he was micromanaging, he would have gone to the goddamn TV studio and said, I don't like the graphics. Here's the way I want the graphics to look, and write them out. Or he would have come to where Tom Pritchard was training guys in the studio in the warehouse and go, no, here's the way you take an arm drag. Vince was aware of everything going on. Vince was in charge of who got to do what. Vince was the ultimate say in who was hired and who was fired for any job, wrestling or otherwise, in that entire company. Ultimately, if it was a low-level person, Vince was in charge of the guy that hired and fired them. But Vince had control of everything. Vince was aware of everything going on, and Vince knew who was in charge and or responsible of everything. In that way, he micromanaged. But he also, and we've talked about that. As I said, he put Jake on the creative team. He was always willing to let guys in the business have a chance to fucking fall on their ass. And many of them did. But with other hires or other people in charge of the business office, yes, he kept guys that were there with him from the start. Ed Cohen was a brilliant arena booker and did the schedule for years and negotiated with all the buildings, but he had people that he had brought on that learned from him. And so everybody that Vince hired, they brought in people that were the best at what they could, that what they did, or could be the best at what they did, or were given the chance to be the best or to be very good. So that level of involvement is what has set Vince apart from everything else. Yes, he changed his mind all the time. He did that in the 90s. But it's gotten more egregious and more of a thing that people talk about 25 years later, whatever, because back then, when Vince was changing the TV constantly, it'd be me and Bruce Pritchard, or Bruce and Pat, or me and Shitstain, or whatever point in time. We were the ones that were going, Jesus Christ, make up your fucking mind. But nobody else even knew, because that was the creative team. And then you'd get to the production meeting, and then we'd go through the format, and then in front of the rest of the production people, he'd change some things, or he'd take something out. Or we'd have something set in a production meeting, and then he'd go talk to the talent involved, and they wanted to do something else in their segment, so he'd change it around. There were changes, but it wasn't like he had a staff of 30 writers, and still he'd get to the production meeting or the day of the show and just tear the whole thing up and start from scratch, as we've heard of him doing, in years recently. And that, not only is that screwing up everybody in the immediate vicinity, but now there's so many more people working on the shows than there were back then, that he was changing his mind more often and more frequently and about more things, and it was throwing hundreds of people into turmoil. Again, when I was there at the Hall of Fame, I said, how many motherfuckers is on this crew? And they had as many people on the teardown crew after the show was over to tear the stuff down and set up for the next day than used to do a full-fledged television taping in the WWE. So exponentially got bigger. Meanwhile, Vince exponentially got more people writing the product, which meant apparently that exponentially he had more to disagree with and, started changing his mind more often. But still, the whole question was, can anybody else work like Vince did, and should Triple H, and is it necessary? And the answer is nobody should micromanage and go back and forth and change their mind incessantly. But with Vince, his micromanaging was making sure that really good people, or the best people he could find, or people that he thought could carry the ball, were in every position, and letting them know what he wanted to happen. And then if what he wanted to happen didn't happen, it was their fault. He knew who to blame, and somebody else would be in that spot. And Triple H is going to have to do the same goddamn thing. And it looks like he is. He's bringing back his people. He's changing the announcers now. He's changed the NXT flavor. He's brought back some of the guys that he liked that they had let go after his heart issues. So it's not like he's going to be in there cooking every dish the restaurant serves, but he's going to know how much the fucking ingredients cost, what the fucking recipes are, and who's actually making the fucking stew. And that's what you have to do. And Tony may know all those things, but he hadn't picked the right people to be in charge of them, which is the difference in the way the WWE's run and the difference in the way AEW's run.
What's the problem with telling yourself that you know enough just based on reading the Observer for years?
In that case, if you know everything there is to know about wrestling just because you've read the Wrestling Observer for years, then I'll have you know that I can now reveal that I'm the best fuck in the history of fucking.
What?
Because nobody's read more porn than me.
You've read more porn? You're reading porn.
Well, yeah. You can't just look at the pictures. You have to have a story.
You read the stories?
Sure.
For the record, I haven't picked up a porno magazine since I was a teenager in Penn Station in the mid-90s, but I don't remember reading the stories.
Wait a minute. What were you doing in Penn Station as a teenager?
I can tell you what I was doing. Usually coming back from ECW in Philadelphia, Georgie Ann Macropolis would drop me off at Penn Station, and I'd have to go down there, and if you'd missed a 2:50 train or sometimes a 3:10 train, you have to wait around till 5:30 in the morning. It was brutal. So what do? You go to the newsstand, you hope you can get some pizza, and you start looking through all the porno mags until your other friends from high school show up from whatever they're doing in the city. City life.
Boy,
you didn't experience
what kind of juvenile delinquent were you?
You were taught to read
and there you were at the Port Authority.
No.
Standing on the side of the street, somebody pulls up, "Hey, kid, you know anybody around here?"
Never the Port Authority, Penn Station.
Are y'all alone? New in town? You want to make some money?
All right, Joe Buck. You've watched too much Midnight Cowboy over here.
Hey, we're walking here.